Well, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Gervasini Nielsen. I head up what we call concept development and digital hub in Danske Bank. What that in essence means is twofolded. One thing is about trying to create new solutions for the market within our transaction banking space. And the second point actually comes down to understanding how do we drive new technologies, how do we look at partnerships, and also how do we look at our digital interfaces in terms of how we communicate and engage with our clients. So what I want to take you through today and have a discussion around is very much about looking at what are the future concepts, how do we actually address the future challenges that we are dealing with, but not so much from our perspective. What it's really about here is about the clients. Because when we look at what is classical in the industry, right? This is no different for banks or for fintechs, whatever, is that technology is becoming cheaper. The rate of adoption is increasing. PSD2 is opening up a new opportunity. And we see that the competition is increasing. So the big question everybody is asking, fintechs, banks, fintechs here being a broad definition, is actually how do we position ourselves in the future ecosystem, right? What is our position? Do we own the customer interface, right? Several banks are probably thinking, yeah, that's the plan, right? Own the interface. Is it owning the data? How do we actually position ourselves? And that's the real question. That's what everybody's trying to have answered. I had a great meeting today where we had a discussion around this morning. And it's no different from being a bank, from being a fintech. So what is it that should be different? What is it we should be focusing on? And what is always missing, or often missing, from this discussion is actually the fact that our customers, corporates in a larger scale, they are also being affected by these market dynamics, so to speak. If we look at it from the corporate's perspective, from the client's perspective, it's really about saying that they have this higher degree of complexity in solving their day-to-day needs. But here's the dilemma. A lot of the discussions that are ongoing at the current moment is how do we actually take blockchain and then pull it out to our clients? How do we utilize AI to create greater solutions? It seems as if the discussion is focusing more about how do we push more solutions to the market instead of actually understanding the customer needs. The point here being is that the solutions that exist today, bank or fintech, they're not sufficient. So how do we move towards a situation where the client's needs are actually met? Now, you can look at the slides here. On the left-hand side, it must be. We can see, for example, from a treasurer's perspective, some of the various systems they need to interact with just to get their daily business done. And this is only on a small subsegment of the tasks that they have to do. We've been interviewing a series of clients. Some of these clients have been stating, well, hey, much of the time is used extracting data or retyping in information from one system to another. How are you addressing this? How are you helping your clients actually make sure that they're spending their time on value-adding business instead of processing? So does it really matter if you can push a new solution to them if the basics and the fundamentals are not in place? We have clients who state they spend an entire week, a month, just doing CFO reporting. How is that from a resource management perspective? Is that optimal? Does it then make a difference that a fintech or a bank comes and tries to push a product that solves a small piece, but really doesn't solve the fundamental problem, the fact that there are inefficient processes that enables them from actually making the decisions that they need? That could be anywhere from actually collecting the data to reducing dependency on calculation capabilities internal within their own companies. one of the notions that we've been working with is actually very much about coming back to basics. It's a notion we call the corporate day. The corporate day is a concept, so to speak. This concept is very independent of the type of client and also the role that a client has in a different company. You could be a treasurer, you can be a controller, you can be a trader, you can be an accountant, you can be a CFO. But what it's really about here is actually to understand what it is that a customer does throughout the day. Because if we can understand what the customer does throughout the day when they walk in the morning, we are to a large extent actually able to understand what are the needs we need to meet. I was happy to hear that the Bisnode fellow who was here before spoke very much about understanding these needs. And it seems like sometimes it's absent from the discussion when we discuss about fintechs. It's actually more a discussion about how do we push the product to the market, or how do we make sure that we create a hype in the market that says, well, Danske Bank is now engaging with multiple third parties, or Nordea is, or ECB, or OP Pohjola, it doesn't matter. How do we make sure that that's not just a commercial aspect, but there's real value behind it? And it keeps coming back to what the real essence of this discussion is how do we help the clients solve their basic needs so the day-to-day business runs as effective as possible. So a lot of the discussions there has been about what is it that the client really wants to achieve? What is the client's role in the business? What are the key challenges that they have? Because to be honest, it's about stop talking about products and features and start approaching customers from a needs and a workflow perspective. There's no client at all who comes in the morning and says, today I'm gonna do payments. It's gonna be an awesome day, payments all day. That doesn't, that doesn't exist, right? So when you're looking at it, coming back here, when you're looking at the corporate day, it's not about actually just understanding how payments fits in, or loans fits in, or some other third-party solution fits in. It's about how they fit together. It's about how they fit together. That is what creates value. This has actually led to a fundamental review of actually how we want to engage with our customers. The development approach. We call it about customer co-creation. These are all great buzzwords unless you actually do something about it. So what we've been doing, to a large extent, has actually been to try to see how can we actually engage with the clients on a more frequent basis and trying to get down to what are the needs. It's about trying to do the prototyping, do it rapidly, and then push it back to the clients, get the feedback, and then be able to actually implement the changes on the go. Having an infrastructure and a setup that allows for that is extremely difficult from a legacy system and from a different development culture over time. But of course, it's not just about banking services here, because what I said about the corporate day here, it's actually trying to understand the fact that the customer engages with multiple parties throughout the day. ERPs, TMSs, banks, third parties. In what way are they engaging with these different parties? How do we make sure that data can flow between these different parties? And how can you actually take that position and then try to add advisory on top of it? So what we do when we talk with our clients is, again, coming back to the corporate day. You can see here some of the approaches that we have. It's really just to say that this is quite illustrative, but it's really about saying that once we've mapped out the various needs for a given role in a company, again, because one size doesn't fit all here, right? They're different depending on segments, countries, and industries. But then it's really about trying to map out throughout that day, who are they engaging with? What value can come from actually understanding how they're engaging with these third parties, including banks? this is where we see that the value for the client will increase substantially. Because this is where we understand why are they using multiple systems, how are they using multiple systems, and what is then the problem that they have today that is not being solved. Once that is solved, you can always come with multiple solutions to that. But you want to get to that point first. So let's not try to leapfrog too far ahead until we have the foundation in place. And this is not Danske Bank as a standalone. This is the point of how we need to drive our customers' development going forward as a whole. So some of the examples that I wanted to take up here was actually some of the work that has been done to try and to understand how could we look at actual customer needs or customer problems, and then how could we then solve them. We have a simple example here on a small ERP provider in Denmark, which is called Economics, or an accountant system. They're part of the Visma group as well. And what we heard from their side was that their clients, when they had to send a payment file to Danske Bank, and when they had to send a payment file to Danske Bank, they had to download it from their accounting system, open up Danske Bank's banking system, upload the file, initiate the payment, download then the reporting file, take it over to their own ERP system, upload the file to then do the reconciliation. So a lot of these processes are automized with various different ERP providers as it is today. But the point here is that for some of the smaller clients that we have, common clients, is that this needs to be automized. You can't spend your time, if you are a CFO or a treasurer in a small company, you can't spend your time doing manual work in that sense. So how do we make sure that we can reduce the processing time and the time that's spent on non-value adding services, and then actually need them to automate the reconciliation process? Simple stuff, but in a way, it's a great example of how we can take something that is very, very basic, but a real pain for the client. But then once that is done, once we've actually identified and secured how can we then optimize a process that today is time-consuming, then what it's really about, how do we then take that one step up? How do we then utilize the data, the accounts payables, the accounts receivables, to actually create a working capital solution? So I'm going from the processing perspective, where we're saving time for the client, to then actually moving to the advisory perspective, where we can add value-added services. This is the development in terms of getting the corporate day for the clients right, from our opinion. And the good thing about this is that this is not a Danske Bank solution. This is a common solution. There is no reason why this solution isn't something that is available for multiple ERPs or other types of services. The point just being, starting at the basics. It's not as sexy, but you know what? It works. Clients love it, and they use it every day. That's a big difference. Another aspect that we have, and forgive me, I'll do a little commercial here. That is actually, we started up the hub, right? And do you know why the hub was actually started up? It actually came down to the fact that we were engaging with several startups who actually were, when we were engaging with them, they were explaining to us the challenges that they had with actually finding proper employees. Actually having a market space to get the proper workforce that they needed to drive their business forward. That was the actual need of this, because there was no separate place that they could go get they could advertise where they would not get, you know, applicants from people whom they were not interested in, so to speak. Try to put it there nicely. At the same time, it's also about trying to understand how could these clients gain access to funding. Because we know in the startup community, seen it from a bank perspective, we are fairly risk adverse, right? We know that 9 out of 10 fintechs will go belly up. So we need to make sure here that when we do make our bets, we want to make sure that there's enough collateral, and we want to make sure here that that bet is fairly sound, depending on our risk appetite. So it's actually also to ensure here that they could gain access to funding, or at least a dialogue with people who could help them provide funding. And this is actually an interesting aspect. Let me just pull this one over to one of our banking colleagues, Santander. Santander, they have an agreement with a company called Lending Circle, right? And what happens is that if a startup or a SME comes to Santander and applies for a loan, and Santander is rejecting them because they either don't believe in the business case or they don't want to take on the risk, refer them to Lending Circle, which is a nice lending platform, which means actually that Santander and that client, they're still happy, right? Santander has given them a really nice thank you for showing up. We unfortunately can't help you, but why don't you come over to our great partner in Lending Circle, and they can then facilitate the lending, right? Again, no one's losing it. Santander is then in a position to then pick them up at a later stage if they grow. The point here just being is that jobs, getting the right applicants, and having the funding in place is a massive problem. This is exactly the same thing as looking at the corporate day. It's just looking at a different segment. So coming back to what I said earlier about how do we position ourselves in the future financial ecosystem? Well, to be honest, we don't believe that it's not about how you position yourself in the financial ecosystem. It's about how the customers want to engage with you and how you can help them enable that corporate day. That doesn't mean that you're solving everything. It means that how are you enabling to do that? Going in believing you can own an interface or own a client relationship or own the data is not going to work in that sense. This is about enabling the client. And you can only do that by gaining the trust and then being there solving what it is that their needs are. So trying to push forward and push new solutions and trying to do that also through fintech collaboration could be one approach. But I think it's a sequence. I think it's different depending on which segments, how mature they are, and how they front to back are actually set up. So the key thing to think about here is that we're focusing very much about fintechs, but how is our core systems and how is our core engagement with clients actually today? Do we really understand the customer needs? When we look at the different, how can we put it, the various forms of third-party collaboration models, you know, you've seen these, the competition, the co-opetition, and collaboration. I borrowed this from Deloitte. It's the same thing we see all the times in the different magazines and the different reports about how collaboration should be done, right? We've heard massive discussions about how we should be collaborating and what the value could be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? We haven't been in a situation where we've seen massive amounts of real solutions being put to the market that have made massive differences from our clients yet. I believe that they will come. But it's also about looking beyond the current hype. Is the different solutions, are they customer-centric enough? Is it a product-pushing approach? You know, sometimes, just to be a bit provocative, when you talk about some of the fintechs, it's really about talking about how great your product is. How awesome that product is. And I'm sure that product is really great. But how does it fit in? Are they here tomorrow? I said 9 out of 10. So what it's really about is that what model will actually be the emerging one? Where are you placing your bets? And from Danske Bank's perspective, of course, we want to be in a situation where we place multiple bets, but the starting point will always be from the client's corporate day, because we believe that this is the approach to move forward on, understanding those needs, help solving those needs, enabling solutions, and then actually providing the advisory. So when we have that line of thoughts, it's also about how can we then ensure that the collaboration potential that is going to come is then also met with fairly strict guiding principles, with the customer pain being one of the most central ones. Of course, there's something about optimizing engines, extending the value chain, and unlocking potential. But the number one and underlying issue is the customer pain point. What is coming out of this? I'm almost deaf from hearing myself saying customer, 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 customer. But this is the point. And it's easy to forget because there's cool solutions and you try to get funding to do the cool solution. So, to end up, what I want to say here is that if any of you can help solve a customer pain in the corporate day, I'll be here. Love to talk to you. My email is there. And that's all for me.
Mark, thank you very much. Very interesting point of view here. The corporate customer, especially, it was an interesting view into how complex the day actually is for them, and the way that the financial institutions understand them. It's not that easy to actually know what everything is in the agenda, but this was pretty insightful here. Do you see that the B2B fintechs have sort of a longer way to go than the B2C ones, since you have other kind of customers there in the end?
Well, I think that it's definitely a different market, and it's also a more complex market, typically.
Yeah.
Right, and if you want to take the regulatory perspective, then that's one that needs to be overcome, but also due to the fact that the financial instruments are typically not as straightforward.
Yeah.
And obtaining the trust with the clients about implementing a solution, a B2B from a fintech, I think is also a bit more of a challenge, because if you are only taking a slice of the corporate day, so to speak, are you then just another, vendor you need to manage from a client's perspective? Yeah, how does it fit together with the ERPs and the multiple banks that the client might have? What additional insights are you providing? And is it actually going to give those benefits compared to the changes the client might have to do in their SAP or in any other ERP system? So I think that the value is not as clear cut, but if it actually succeeds, the volumes are massive.
Oh.
And therefore, I just think the threshold for success is significantly larger.
Good viewpoint. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.